It's my pleasure today to be joined by Anil Sawkwar, the president of Rakuten Symphony's RAN business unit. In his role, Anil has played a fundamental part in the success of Rakuten Symphony. Welcome, Anil, and thank you for joining me today from Boston at this early hour.
Thanks for having me, James, and look forward to the interactive session.
One thing I'm sure most of our viewers are very keen to hear more about is Rakuten Symphony's Open RAN licensing program. This model is regarded quite widely across the industry as being very unique and innovative. Can you give us a general update on how things are progressing? I realize some details may be sort of under wraps at this point, but what can you share with our viewers today?
Yeah. We are providing a solution that others can essentially take it and integrate it part of their overall solution and make it available. And we will continue to provide the new releases that we ourselves deploy in the network. So that's a fundamental difference. Now, the approach we're going to take in the marketplace is twofold. One, we will provide the ORAN-based solution directly to the operators like what we do today. We have two, and there are others in the pipeline. In addition to that, license our ORAN software to strategic partners. And the strategic partners could be the system integrators, other RAN solution providers who want to get into this space, and also radio vendors who want to essentially expand in terms of their own influence in the marketplace in terms of taking the solution for whether it is private 5G, this or that.
The biggest factors that are inhibiting Open RAN adoption, is it lack of feature parity? Is it the MNO's preference of dealing with one supplier, perhaps a lack of radio ecosystem suppliers, or just integration complexity?
I think there's a general recognition, these are solvable problems, and we are also helping in many of these areas in terms of developing the radio ecosystem and also addressing the integration complexity. On the first part, we being the first ones to essentially start looking at 4G deployment, the feature parity, especially for brownfield operators around the world, was a big issue. And over the last 2-3 years, we have gotten our software base to a point where we believe close to 70 to 80% of what is needed is already there in place, part of our code base. And we are well positioned in terms of some of these opportunities that we want to go after. But we are strategic in the way we are approaching in terms of deploying our solution in our customer base.
Energy efficiency is, of course, a key issue that MNOs are looking at in terms of Open RAN. How are vendors trying to mitigate this problem in the future?
I mean, one data point I can share is the traditional way of deploying network was to essentially make sure you dimension the network for peak traffic. That in itself is a power guzzler. Because whether it is traffic or not, you essentially consume that power. And that basically gets into the overall expense associated with it. Now, with the techniques that we have in place and techniques that we've been thinking about, is to essentially deploy the network for average traffic. That sort of gives you right off the bat certain advantages in terms of how to manage the power.
Are there any other AI and ML test cases that we would like to address at the highest level? Are there any other specific use cases that you're working on or things you've got in mind?
There are about 2 or 3 specific areas where we are looking at AI, ML based approach within the RAN itself. And a couple of the examples that I can cite here, and in fact, I think this is a real active work between the CTO organization and the engineering organization within the BU. One is many of these operators have different frequency bands. How do you optimize the downlink performance, leveraging the different frequency bands that the operator has, and also the UV has a visibility of it. The second use case, again, within the RAN itself, is how do you essentially, from a healing perspective, how do you essentially have a coordinated way of managing the traffic across multiple distributed units? Is another use case. So like that, there are a few very targeted areas that we want to go after. And again, we want to be careful about not boiling the ocean and adding complexity where things fall apart. So we want to be very surgical in terms of the use cases that we want to go after in the RAN.
Is there any message you'd like to give to our audience today? And is there any sort of like final thoughts you'd have in terms of wrapping up the session, or thinking how you would sort of summarize the state of play at the moment, really, in terms of what we're doing?
I think we have let me just wrap up by basically saying the next 5 to 6 years are going to be real exciting years in terms of evolution of this whole RAN space, leveraging a lot of the technologies we touched on, whether it is AI, ML-based technology, leveraging the GPUs, the CPUs. All of this play into this whole evolution of where the RAN is today and where it's going to be in the next 5, 6 years. So that's going to require a lot of training, a lot of study, and a lot of different ways on how to approach it and how does it really economically make sense and how do you monetize it. So all of these combinations based on where things are, I do believe we are at an inflection point based on where the industry is. So the next 5 to 6 years are going to be exciting years, and I look forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that does bring us to time. Anil, thank you very much for joining me on Inside Track today. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you. And thank you for sharing your insight and experience on a topic that is not only fundamental to Rakuten Symphony, but is also something that plays a very important part in the Rakuten group more broadly, and in global telecom indeed. So thank you very much for joining me today. Wish you all the best, and thank you to all our viewers as well.
Thank you all.